How's it going, you guys? So, I'm feeling extremely tired from all the MMA and powerlifting I've been doing lately, but I have to hammer out this video. So, in this video, I'm going to be talking a little bit about Japan and why they might have, why possibly the reasons why they have the greatest or one of the greatest life expectancies in the world, right? So, Japan, it's been constantly said to be like one of the healthiest cultures. And, we know that Okinawa, which is an island owned by Japan, happens to have the largest concentration of centenarians in the world, along with some countries on the Mediterranean, which we'll kind of get into that a little bit in this video as well. France, what else? Greece, Crete, etc., etc., etc. So, there's some very fascinating facts about Japan that a lot of biased people will not want to acknowledge that seem to be a contributor to their longevity. So, let's just dive into this, okay? So, first of all, as you can see right here, I have this is in 2017, okay, this is the best data I could find while as tired as I am right now, the best data I could pull up. There's many charts from many different years, but I'm just going to use this one, okay? So we have Monaco, which is a country in the Mediterranean, okay, and then we have Japan, which is coming in second. Then of course we have Singapore, we have Macau, if I pronounce it properly, then San Marino, Iceland, and Hong Kong. So first of all, I just want to get a couple of facts out the way. So Monaco, they are a Mediterranean country. They consume a lot of olive oil, and they also, a lot of their diet is based on fish. Okay, most Mediterranean countries, their diet has been based on olive oil and fish for quite some time. As a matter of fact, olive oil consumption has been something like 200 to 300 years, actually. It actually hasn't been a traditional food item, but fish has been. And any country that's off on an island or based on the sea, such as the Mediterranean regions in Japan, and even things like Okinawa and even Korea, okay, they eat a lot of fish. You got to be a fool to believe that somebody who lives on the damn ocean does not base their diet on fish. That's completely ridiculous. And even statistics, which we're about to go into here in a little bit, show these island countries actually have some of the highest consumption of fish in the world. Okay, so Hong Kong is also one of the largest consumers of red meat in the world, particularly from pork, but also from beef. Now, of course, they do have an amazing healthcare system, and they're a pretty wealthy country, stuff like that, but, can't be ignored. They do eat a lot of meat, okay? Iceland also eat a lot of fish. I believe it is Iceland, yes. I think they're actually one of the highest consumers of fish in the world. Let me see, let me get back to my data here. Let's say consumption. Here we go, fish consumption. So yes, Iceland actually have the second largest fish consumption per capita. Okay, Hong Kong is the third, and mind you, Hong Kong, actually, I think in 2018, Hong Kong was the number one highest life expectancy in the world. Macau is a, Mediterranean region. South Korea is, they've been battling, some years South Korea actually had the lowest levels of heart disease in the world, I think it was. Was it South Korea? I think so. And then we have Japan, which, by the way, Japan just recently, I think in 2018, had the highest fish consumption per capita. So, and also, keep in mind, traditionally, Japan ate a whole lot more fish. And there was an article, I don't know if I kept it up, but there's an article explaining how Japan basically in like the 1960s and earlier than that ate a lot more fish, or before the war and stuff like that. We know Okinawa, the only reason why Okinawa started eating a plant-based diet during 1940s, 50s, and 60s is because of a intra-war and post-war famine. Because the wars were going on, the War of Okinawa, I think World War II. Forgive me for my historical ignorance, but there were a lot of wars going on, and I actually have met troops, not troops, but soldiers that actually were stationed in Okinawa at that time, and they mentioned being served a lot of eggs and fish in the restaurants. I didn't know they even had restaurants in Okinawa at that time, but they're saying that the majority of the Asians, they survived mainly on purple sweet potatoes or purple potatoes and white rice and stuff like that. And I actually have trained with karate senseis whose family is from Okinawa. I train with multiple karate senseis from Okinawa, and they tell me that some of their grandparents and whatnot, ate a lot of pork. They mainly the odd cuts, though, like pork feet and stuff like that. But they ate a lot of white rice and whatever fruits and vegetables and starches they would grow on the island. But they ate a lot of fish and a lot of pork. They said that they would raise their own pigs and stuff like that. And so this whole idea that for one, caloric restriction was a big part of Okinawa's longevity diet. That's what you'll read. But yeah, caloric restriction because why? Because they were in a famine, because they didn't have enough food to survive. So obviously they're going to be restricting calories. But anyone with enough access to healthy foods are not going to purposely restrict their calories. Not on an island, not in a society that has no clue about caloric restriction and health and longevity like we do in the West. So at the time, this generation of centenarians and whatnot, maybe 15 years of their life they were restricting calories and eating a plant-based diet, because of a famine. But do you think that that's the reason for their longevity, or do you think it's the traditional Japanese diet, which is high in fish, and what else is it high in? Is high in eggs. So Japan, and this data on consumption per capita was in 2013. Okay, it was taken. But just recently, I think in 2018, Japan still had some of the highest egg consumption in the world. Okay, and we know traditional Japanese food is very basic. Small balanced portions of everything. You have rice. You have like raw egg is very common. And then lots and lots of fish, guys. Like all of these people who say, oh, like the Japanese are so healthy, they eat a plant-based diet. Like sure, they eat a wide variety of different plant foods. In fact, I believe that they even have a specific phrase or a specific Japanese word dedicated towards eating a variety of foods. And it's commonly passed down wisdom in Japanese culture to eat as wide of a variety as possible. I think that they had said to aim for over 100 different foods per day. And mind you, this is word of mouth from what I've heard from Japanese friends of mine and stuff like that. And I've seen I think I saw a documentary a while ago where they talk about this. And basically, the older generation, their idea of a healthy diet is eating as large of a variety of food as possible. And that's why if you look at Japanese cuisine, you don't see these giant meals, okay? You see how small portions here, a little bit of salad, some miso soup that looks like, some pot stickers and some white rice, and this is not Japanese food here, but you get the picture. Little portions of a little bit of everything. That looks like a tofu block, that's seaweed salad, that's white rice, and that's some type of soup, most likely miso. Okay, they eat a lot of fermented soy, and they do eat a lot of soy. Mind you, they are very small, and some people claim it's because of their high reliance on grains as a society for so long. But they eat a large variety of plant foods and animal foods as well. And this is very common. I don't know how many of y'all have actually been over to friends' houses who are from Japan, whose family's from Japan. I've been to traditional Japanese restaurants prepared by a Japanese chef, and mind you, we paid like $20 for a small piece of fish with an orange peel or something and some rice and small amount of vegetables. walked out hungry. But you know, and that might be another thing is they just eat smaller portions. Maybe they, as a society, they're programmed to eat less calories. But honestly, come on. I mean, you know, I think the correlation is pretty strong. And also mechanistic data and clinical trials as well. We know that omega-3s, we know selenium, by the way, is very high in fish. And a large variety of other, xanasthaxin is commonly found in many different fish, particularly salmon. Vitamin D, one of the only sources of vitamin D in the diet is eggs, which happens to be very high in the Japanese diet, as well as fish. Okay? And so you get a variety of, you know, I think there's more nutrition in eggs and fish than there are in red meat, even if it's grass-fed. And mind you, there are lab analysis that show grass-fed beef actually does have a greater nutritional profile than grain-fed beef, but how significant is that on health outcomes? We don't know. Anyway, so this is very important for people to see. Okay, sure, there's a lot of variety of plants, but it's not based on plants. In fact, what's another interesting thing is, as far as I know, dairy consumption is pretty low in Asian cultures in general, but especially Japan. Now, I don't know if this has changed or not, but most Asians actually seem to have a genetic, they seem to be genetically incompatible with dairy as it is. And I believe Asians have the highest rates of lactose intolerance, by the way. Definitely can't be eating cheese and stuff like that every day like I could be. But, and by the way, this is a really good video. Why is the Japanese diet so healthy? By, what's the guy's channel's name? What I've Learned. But anyway, my brother actually just traveled to Japan recently and posted pictures of sake and everything. So the Japanese diet is very... Oh, and green tea is another thing. So green tea, obviously. Japanese, they eat a lot of polyphenols, plant nutrients, antioxidants, and they also eat a large amount of fish and eggs. And, you know, this is coming from somebody who's been on a ketogenic diet for the last couple of months. I think this bias towards, you know, like, oh, like plants are bad for you and, you know, they're poisonous and anti-nutrients. Like, listen, yes, like for many people, there's going to be a large amount of people with intolerances to plant foods and things. But is that nature or is that nurture? And you can argue until you're blue in the face that human beings are meant to be carnivores. But I think it's pretty clear that there's a large group of societies, both white, you know, white Caucasian European type people from the Mediterranean and people from Asia, you know, who eat a lot of plants in their diet. In fact, you know, where a lot of my ancestors are from, you know, French and you know, the Mediterranean, they eat a large amount of plant foods despite the fact that supposedly they came from like colder climates and had to consume a lot of animal protein and stuff like that. Or we ascended from Neanderthals and ate reindeer, whatever. But they still have some of the longest lifespans in the world, like Monaco, Mediterranean country. Japan eats a lot of fish. They're on the coast. Singapore, I believe, is on the ocean. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Macau, I forgot what that is. I think that is another Mediterranean region. San Marino, I believe that's over by Italy. That's a Mediterranean region. Iceland, I know they eat a shit ton of fish. I mean, really, guys. Yeah, Iceland, lots of fish. That Macau, they eat a lot of fish. Macau, and it's the same thing, it's just spelled differently. They spell it both ways. Macau eats a large amount of fish. Hong Kong eats a large amount of fish. Okay? Sure, and Hong Kong had the #1 life expectancy in the world in 2018. And they also have higher red meat consumption. China as a whole, that's another thing to think about. So Japan eats some of the most eggs in the world. At least this is from 2013. But I believe that there was another analysis done in 2018 that showed Japan had some of the largest egg consumption in the world. China. All right, I'm gonna go Donald Trump on people's butts, I guess. But if you notice, there's a large amount of Mediterranean and Asian countries on this list. If you notice, I mean France and Italy, they're pretty low there now, but you know, most of these countries have been like rotating, and they've been fighting for the top 10 spot for a while. So I think it's very important to learn from the top, 20 longest life expectancy, countries in the world, see what they're eating and see if that adds up. I mean, and mind you, remember, eggs happen to be a very high source of what? Omega-3, DHA, and EPA, depending on what the bird is eating. But even conventional eggs have a pretty modest concentration of EPA and DHA. So eggs and fish happen to be the number one source of both vitamin D, vitamin K2, omega-3, DHA, and EPA. And, there's vitamin A in some fish, but lots of vitamin A in eggs. And also something to keep in mind. So a lot of people don't know this, but glutathione is our body's master endogenous antioxidant. And in order for glutathione to be produced, so there's actually a process. It has to be converted from homocysteine. So you hear some vegans who say, oh, homocysteine is pro-inflammatory and it'll kill you. And the greatest source of homocysteine is eggs, because they have the highest amount of homocysteine creating amino acids. So they say like cysteine and methionine convert into homocysteine, which raise your risk of cancer and heart disease. Well, listen, guys, if you eat an egg white, you're just going to get the amino acid content. And that will promote homocysteine, and it'll make you end up like Bob Harper, who ate mainly egg whites and chicken breasts without the fat, which have nutrients that what? The yolk of the egg has choline, it has vitamin B6, B3, B12. It has nutrients that actually turn homocysteine into glutathione. So, and then another thing is, if you go to the World Carnivore Tribe group on Facebook, you'll see anecdotal reports every day of people who went from like even a standard keto diet or even a vegan diet, or a regular healthy diet, right? And they were eating, their inflammatory markers went down, their diabetes, their hemoglobin A1C went down, their C-reactive protein went down, which tends to go up in relation to how much homocysteine you have in the blood, etc., etc. So all I'm saying is these fat-soluble nutrients. I'm not vibing with that Frank Tufano nonsense, like, oh, it's the Garden of Youth. But look, it's clearly very important that we get vitamin D, vitamin A, and the omega-3 fatty acids in our diet. And again, if you see greatest fish consumption in the world, Japan is right up there. And in 2018, I'll have to pull that one up in a future video. And then eggs, like really, oh, saturated fat's gonna kill you, sure, but you know what? In one egg, you've got about one gram of saturated fat. Then you have 1.5 grams of monounsaturated and 1.5 grams of polyunsaturated fats that includes a high concentration of omega-3 polyunsaturated fats. So, just because, like saturated fat's bad for you, they say. But most foods contain monounsaturated, saturated, and polyunsaturated fats all in one. And eggs happen to be very high in healthy fats that have been shown to actually reduce your risk of all-cause mortality. That means monounsaturated, and that means polyunsaturated omega-6. And a little fun fact, these Mediterranean countries, they also consume a large amount of olive oil, which is high in monounsaturated fats. So I'm just saying, there's a lot more to it than most people understand. But again, polyphenols, antioxidants, Um, you know, and another thing is Japanese people eat white rice. And so I think I've seen an analysis that showed less fruit consumption, fructose consumption among Japanese people. But essentially, there are a lot of diseases that are linked not to fructose ingestion at healthy dosages, but essentially overconsumption of fructose has been linked to many diseases. So vegans will say, oh, like, saturated fat is bad for you, so don't eat eggs. But eggs contain more monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats than they do saturated. And there's a lot of people who believe fructose is bad for you. And a lot of these studies are done using isolated fructose, like high fructose corn syrup and fruit drinks without the fiber and the nutrients, right? So without the fiber and nutrients, maybe fructose on its own could be pro-inflammatory and bad. But with the fiber and with the nutrients, maybe it's actually not so bad, right? The same thing can be said about saturated fat when it's eaten alongside of an egg that contains a lot of synergistic nutrients and nutrients that convert homocysteine into glutathione. Anyway, the staple carbohydrate in the Japanese diet is white rice. So white rice is higher in glucose rather than, fructose. And so I'm just saying there's a lot of links towards non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and fructose, diabetes and metabolic syndrome and fructose. But the other thing is, the countries that have the highest amount of fructose consumption, they consume a lot of high fructose corn syrup and fruit juice and sugar and stuff like that. So maybe it's not whole foods that contain fructose, especially because it's been, wild fruits have been high in fructose for the majority of human evolution. So anyway, lots of antioxidants, lots of fish, lots of eggs in the Japanese diet, and Mediterranean, and then even in Hong Kong and China. So, well, Hong Kong is in China, whatever. So you get the picture. I think that this is very important to consider. So leave your questions in the comments down below. Let me know what you think, and I will talk to you all next time.